Today, we're taking a look at a new feature in Spring Data called AOT Repositories. Now, you hear the term AOT. What is that? That's ahead of time optimizations. Your mind might immediately go to, well, I'm not building native images, Dan, and that's okay. AOT is not exclusive for building native images. In fact, we can take advantage of them in certain situations like we are going to today with repositories. Now I'm going to jump over to my screen here and we'll take a look at the Spring reference documentations for ahead of time optimizations. And Spring's AOT optimizations are meant to inspect the application context at build time and apply decisions and discovery logic that usually happens at runtime. That's going to be the case here with Spring Data and repositories. Now we get caught up because we know that Java is a statically typed language, but it has a lot of dynamic capabilities that it can do at runtime. So applying such optimization early implies the following restrictions. The class path is going to be fixed and fully defined at build time. This means that beans provided in your application context cannot change at runtime. Bean definitions with instance suppliers cannot be transformed ahead of time, and there's more to it. Again, there's a lot of things that we can do dynamically at runtime in Java. Just because it's a statically typed language doesn't mean that everything is static. So I'll leave you a link to this if you want to read through the ahead of time optimizations. Now, this is a phase that we can go through. Now, when we want to build something like a GraalVM native image, this is a precondition for that. But as we'll see, there's other reasons to go ahead and use these AOT optimizations. Now, I have a GitHub repo here, Spring Data AOT. This is going to be all of the code that we're going to walk through today. But I just want to take a look at the README here and take a look at why this matters. So you can do a couple of things with this. One, you can catch errors before they reach production. One of the biggest places is maybe you have like an at query annotation and you define the query that you want to run. If there were typos in that, say for in a select statement, and you didn't catch that, this will help you kind of catch those errors. The biggest thing for me is faster startup and lower memory usage. Now, if you have a very small application and very few repository methods that have to basically be implemented at runtime, this is not going to be a huge gain. It'll be a little bit of a gain, but where you really see this, if you have larger applications and tons of repositories, normally, we take those interfaces, let's say the coffee repository that we're going to use today, and at runtime, we'll turn that into an implementation. Well, we can go ahead and alleviate that runtime usage, and we can do this at compile time, so at build time. So because we do that, we get 50 to 70% faster startup. This is critical for serverless and microservices. We get that reduced memory footprint. And if we want to go ahead and turn this into a native image later, we can do that. What it also gives us is better developer experience out of the box. If you've ever tried debugging one of these repositories, you can do it, but there is a lot of jumping through some hoops to kind of figure out where things are going on. Also, when you create like a dynamic finder in a repository, it may not be clear to you what is happening underneath the hood. What is that magic that's happening? Now we get some clear insights as to what is happening underneath the hood. What is the SQL being generated? How is it working? And so we can debug these things a lot easier. So this is the repo we're going to go through today. I also want to leave you with this article here over on the JetBrains blog, Mastering Spring Data AOT and IntelliJ IDEA. I am using a newer version of IntelliJ at the time of this recording, 2025.3, and it has built-in support for this. So once we've kind of built our application and we look at a repository, we can use the gutter icons to kind of jump to the implementations. Again, this gives us clear insight, makes it easier for debugging. This is a really good article for that. So to get started, we are going to head over to start.spring.io. We're going to create a new application. I'm using Spring Boot 4. That is going to pick up the version of Spring Data that has the AOT repositories. I'll fill in some metadata about this. And the application that we're going to build is going to use Spring Web, Spring Data, JDBC. This will work with a few different flavors of Spring Data. I know JPA is one of them. I'll have to look at the documentation for exactly which versions are supported. You can use whatever database you want here, but just to get up and running quickly, I'm going to use an H2 database, and then I'll pull in the Spring Boot DevTools. With that, you can go ahead and click generate, download this as a zip file. You can open it up in whatever IDE or text editor you're most efficient in. For me, that's going to be IntelliJ. I'm using that new feature here today. So if you want to, go ahead and head over to the JetBrains website and download that. With that, I think we have everything we need. Let's write some code. All right, we're going to get started here. Now we're going to move through this stuff pretty quickly because this is just traditional build a web app that talks to a database. We've done this before. I wanted to get into some of the repository stuff. But if you want to follow along, you can grab some of the SQL that we'll kind of just paste in here and the models that we'll kind of copy over. You can grab that from the repository that we just showed off. So first thing I want to look at is the pom.xml. We are using Spring Boot 4.0. With 4.0 came the modularization of some of the code base, and some of those things have changed. So if you're moving from 3.x to 4.0, and I got a comment the other day that like the H2 console wasn't working, the dependency has changed for that. Now you see we have the Spring Boot H2 console. We're bringing in Spring Boot Starter Data JDBC. We have WebMVC. We have our web tools, our dev tools on the class path here, and then a few tests. So our POM is ready to go, and we need to go ahead and configure a couple of things. First, I'm going to go into my application.yaml, and I'm going to add a little bit of database configuration. Now, you could use something like Docker Compose and a Postgres database. I wanted to just keep this simple. We're going to use an H2 database here. I have some configuration for that. The username and the password. This is actually the default, so you probably don't need that. This is probably the default for that, so you don't need that as well. But I also have Spring Data JDBC configuration. So if we are using something like H2, I believe this will automatically get picked up as well and set to init mode. But if you're using something like Postgres, this won't happen. So good to go ahead and make sure this is on. So with that configuration, we should be able to connect to a database, but I want to go ahead and set up a schema and some data. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say new file schema.sql. And we'll paste them in here. And so we're going to create a new table called coffee. We're going to set some indexes on it. We're going to create a new table called orders. And we're going to create a new table called order items. So this is kind of setting our application up here to be all about the coffee, which I'm a huge fan of. So now that we got some schema in place, we can go ahead and add some data. Now, if you're kind of new to this, that's okay. These are by convention. So data.sql and schema.sql are by convention. You can always go change these in your configuration if you want to. But if these are here and this is on, then these will get picked up and run when we go ahead and launch our application. Now, because we're using an H2 database, we're basically reconstructing the database every time we restart the application, which is good for a demo like this. So we have some data. We're just adding a whole bunch of coffees in here so that we have some data. So now that we have our schema, our data, our configuration, we need to create a couple of things. So I'm going to start with a package of coffee. And inside of coffee, we are going to add just a couple of things here. Let's add a couple of records, actually a record and an enum. So I have a record called coffee is going to use the table coffee that we just set up. And we have an ID, name, description, price, and size. That looks good. And then I'll go ahead and create a new package called order. And inside of order, we need a couple of things, I think. Yes, we need 3 actually. So we'll go ahead and paste these in here as well. And again, this is just an order record, which is tied to the table orders, order item, which is tied to the table order items. And then we have an enum for order status. So I think with those things in place, we're not going to get into like building a controller or a repository yet. I want to make sure this works. With that in place, we should be able to go ahead and run our application. And it started on port 8080. We see that the H2 console is available at /H2 console. Here's the database H2 in-memory coffee. So now we can head over to the browser and check this out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. Our username is SA. There is no password. We can test this connection. It is successful. We can go ahead and connect. We see we have our tables. So the schema got picked up. If you don't see tables here, could be something to do with that init mode. Maybe the file was named wrong, or maybe you tried to configure it into a different location and you have a wrong location. Check the logs in that case. But I have coffee orders and order items. And if I look at coffee and go ahead and run this, I see I have a bunch of coffees in there. Let's go ahead and see if we have some orders. And if we run this, we do have some orders. And if we go ahead and clear this out and see if we have some order items, and we do. So far, so good. We were able to go ahead and kind of get the basic part of this application up and running. And now we can start talking about the repositories. All right, so let's start by creating the coffee repository. So we're going to create a new interface. This is going to be called the coffee repository. And then this is of type interface that extends the list CRUD repository. And it takes a type and the ID type. So in this case, we're working with coffees. And the ID type of the coffee record is a long. So if you're new, oh boy, we have a typo. Come on, Dan, let's learn how to spell here, please. So coffee, refactor. Okay, that looks good. So if you're new here, what happens with this is we take this coffee repository, we're extending something called list CRUD repository, which gives us a way to find all and return a list, or find all by ID and return a list. It also extends CRUD repository, so we get like all of the CRUD methods. So repository is a way for us to get a whole bunch of data access right away without having to write any implementation. Now, the way it does this is we have this interface. And at runtime, Spring will look at this interface and turn this into an implementation. So it sees all the methods that list CRUD repository has. It sees all the methods CRUD repository has. It sees all the methods, and so on. So it sees all these methods. It also looks in here for any of your methods. So maybe we have something that returns a list of coffees and we call it find by. You see, we start to get some IntelliJ because it can start to like figure out what we're trying to search for. Now, what if I type something like name wrong? So far, so good. Method find by name is never used, but it doesn't know that there's a problem there. So if we go ahead and restart this, we'll see we actually do get a problem here. And it says, hey, no property name for type coffee. Did you mean name? Yes, we did. But if we go ahead and do that, that would fix that issue. So it takes a look, it finds all those methods, and it turns that into an implementation at runtime. For something small like this, where I only had like one method and I only have like a few methods in repositories, not a huge deal. But if you're working in very large applications where all of this needs to be calculated at runtime, this could be an issue. So let's take a look at this repository. I'm going to go ahead and copy some methods in here, and we're going to have a few methods here. So I have a list of coffee, find by name, containing, ignore case. So I have some notes in here too, so you can kind of look at these later. I have a list of coffee, find by size and price greater than. So this takes in a size and a big decimal price. And then I have find affordable coffees by size. And in this one, I'm using the query annotation to say this is the query that I want to run when this particular dynamic finder is created. And a benefit here is that AOT validates this SQL syntax during compilation. A typo in this, select, so let's do this. So let's say select. Let's go ahead and run this application. Right now, there's no error there. So if we just thought this was okay and we push this to production, we are going to have some issues at production with this because select without an E is not an actual query, right? So we can get some benefits here by figuring this out at runtime or at compilation time. So let's do this. We have this repository. Let's go ahead and create a controller. So let's call this the coffee controller. And there's that. And again, I'm going to paste some code. This isn't really the interesting part, right? Did I spell that wrong again? Good job, Dan. One of those days, one of those days. So let's fix this coffee controller. Yes. Okay. So we're bringing in the coffee repository. I have a few methods. I want to be able to get all coffees. I want to search by name. I want to filter. I want to get affordable coffees. These are some things I can do. Now, again, one of the issues here is like, hey, if we have some typos here, we're not going to catch those. They're also like really hard to debug at runtime or at dev time, right? Because this implementation gets turned in by Spring, and it happens underneath the hood. So if like trying to figure out like what is the actual SQL that this creates so that I can understand like where maybe some bottleneck is. This is hard to do currently. And AOT repositories are going to help us with that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and enable this AOT repository. So I'm going to go into my Palm, and here in the plugin for our Spring Boot Maven plugin, I am going to add an execution called process AOT. And this is going to help us process the AOT. So when I go ahead and run something like npm clean package now, you'll see right now in my target folder, I don't have this. If I go in here, I just see a coffee repository. But what this is going to do now is hopefully build the actual implementation. So what we're saying is, at compilation time, I want you to run this AOT phase. And this AOT phase is going to look at anything, in this case, a repository, and turn it into the actual implementation. And we should see it in the target folder. So I'm going to open up my terminal. I'm going to run mvm w clean package, and we do want to skip test for this one. And let's see if this creates it, and it says build successful. So now if we go into our classes and dev and coffee, we see a whole bunch more things in here. So one of the things that we'll see is a coffee repository.json, and this lays out all of the data in the coffee repository. So we can see there's a name, find affordable coffees by size, you see the signature, and then you see the query. And this JSON file will help tools give you some better insight into these repositories, and I'll show you that in a second. But also in here, you'll see a coffee repository. So this is the coffee repository extends list, but you'll see the implementation now. So you see coffee repository implementation extends AOT repository fragment support. And for each of those methods in here, we only have 3, you'll now see this. So I see find affordable coffees by size. I can see the exact SQL that is being generated. I can see what's going on in here. There's actual code now. So this makes debugging a lot easier. So I'm using a version of IntelliJ 2025.3, I believe. And what's cool about this is if I open up the repository in code, and I have that build step done, you'll now see some gutter icons over here. And it allows me to jump right to the method in the implementation so that I can see some things. So if I wanted to go ahead and set a breakpoint here, or actually more importantly, set a breakpoint in here, this becomes much easier to debug. And now it's not like this magic thing of something happening underneath the hood. I can actually see what's happening here. So I'll paste these in. We'll go ahead. We don't have any of those in here, right? So let's just double check. So we don't see an implementation of an order repository because we didn't have one. Actually, we need the order repository too. So let's go ahead and put that in there. Again, pretty similar. Here's our list CRUD repository. I have some like custom queries in here just to give us a little bit more coverage of what's going on. So let's go ahead and run that again. And it looks good. And now if we go into here, you will see order. And now we have our order implementation for our repository. And again, just giving you some insight into what is actually being generated. It's not just that though. I think I mentioned it at the beginning. Let's go ahead and put this README in this one. So you'll have this in the final repository, but I mentioned this when we took a look at the README. So if we go readme.md, and I paste this in, catching some of those typos, especially in like the SQL queries, that is a big one. But some of the bigger ones for me are faster startup and lower memory usage. We are not having to do this at runtime anymore. And for very large applications, that little bit of speed improvement and a little bit of memory improvement for every repository is really going to pay off dividends. So I would say this is a huge benefit for me. And then you get the better developer experience, and you can kind of get a little bit more confidence that you can catch some of these typos and not run into them at runtime. So there you have it, Spring Data AOT repositories in the latest version of Spring Data. This is a really nice addition. Again, we get some better developer experience out of the box. We get some huge performance benefits, especially in those larger applications where we're using lots of repositories. I'm a huge fan of this new feature. Spring Framework 7 is now out. Spring Boot 4 is now out. And a lot of the projects are now supporting Spring Boot 4. And we see a lot of new features coming out like this AOT repositories in Spring Data. So I hope you get a chance to give it a test drive. All the new features. If you want, I have a playlist of new features in Spring that you can go ahead and check out either somewhere up here or in the description below. But let me know if you had a chance to give this a test drive. Let me know what you think of this. And let me know if there's any other features that are now newly out that you want me to cover. With that, friends, I hope you learned something new today. I really had a lot of fun putting this one together. I love learning these new features, and I hope they're valuable for you. If you found this video useful, do me a big favor, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding, friends.